A single blow, a single breath, a single chance to survive. In feudal Japan, when two samurai met for a duel, the average duration of the confrontation was only 3 to 5 seconds. 3 seconds between life and a brutal death. In 1596, a boy of only 13 years old named Miyamoto Musashi waited patiently while an experienced samurai named Arima Kihei drew his razor-sharp katana. Young Musashi had no sword, only a wooden staff almost 2 meters long. Kihei attacked first, confident in his superiority. Musashi dodged and struck the samurai between the eyes with devastating force. Kihei's skull cracked like porcelain. Musashi then continued to strike the experienced warrior's head repeatedly until the man fell dead in the dust. The audience applauded ecstatically. That boy would become the greatest duelist in Japanese history, undefeated in more than 60 deadly duels. But this is only the tip of the iceberg when we talk about the deadly truth behind samurai duels. The reality of samurai duels was infinitely more brutal than any Hollywood film has ever shown. While cinema sells us elegant choreography and long exchanges of blows, the historical truth is that most duels ended in a matter of seconds with catastrophic injuries. Historical documents from the Edo period describe with surgical precision the outcome of these confrontations. Crushed skulls, limbs severed with a single cut, torsos sliced in half, instant decapitations. Samurai fought without armor, wearing only their kimonos, which meant that every well-placed blow was potentially lethal. There were no second chances. A single miscalculated movement, a fraction of a second of hesitation, meant the difference between walking home or having your body carried on a bamboo mat. And this brutality was not accidental. It was absolutely intentional. Samurai trained their entire lives specifically to kill another human being in the most efficient way possible with a sharp blade. Every kata practiced, every movement repeated thousands of times, had a single ultimate purpose: destroy your opponent before they can destroy you. The psychological aspect of samurai duels was as deadly as the blade itself. Warriors spent years training not only their bodies, but primarily their minds, through Zen Buddhist practices that arrived in Japan in the 12th century. The goal was to achieve a mental state called Heijoshin, a calm and steady mind capable of remaining balanced regardless of the surrounding chaos. Imagine being just a few meters away from another highly trained man who desperately wants to kill you. The natural fear, the adrenaline, the instinct to flee, all of this needed to be completely mastered. Samurai practiced daily meditation, sometimes for hours, focusing on their breathing, emptying their minds of superfluous thoughts. A samurai who allowed fear or anger to control his actions was virtually dead. The story of Miyamoto Musashi against Sasaki Kojiro in 1612 perfectly illustrates this psychological warfare. Kojiro was considered the best swordsman in all of Japan, a martial arts teacher to the shogun himself, a man who had never lost a duel. Musashi arrived at the duel hours late, dressed as a beggar, carrying a wooden sword he had carved from an oar during his journey. Kojiro was furious. Rage consumed him, and that single uncontrolled emotion was his death sentence. When they finally attacked, Musashi dodged Kojiro's blade by millimeters and landed a devastating blow to the champion's head. Kojiro fell. A second blow pierced his throat, crushing ribs and puncturing his lungs. Kojiro died right there, defeated not only by Musashi's technique, but mainly by his own lack of emotional control. But not all duels followed codes of honor. There was a practice called tsujigiri, which literally means cut at the crossroads. During the Sengoku period between 1467 and 1600, some warriors tested their new katanas or fighting techniques on innocent and defenseless people. Imagine walking down a Kyoto street at night and suddenly being attacked by a samurai who simply wants to test if his new sword can sever a human arm with a single blow. This happened. Historical documents confirm it. The Edo government banned this practice in 1602, establishing capital punishment for anyone caught. But thousands of innocent civilians had been mutilated and killed. The most famous incident occurred in 1696, when a wealthy lord named Sano Jirozaemon had a psychotic break and murdered dozens of prostitutes with his katana in Edo's red light district. Even though he was of noble class, he was considered a mass murderer and executed. And you, after discovering this brutal and dark side of the samurai, Can you still romanticize the figure of the Japanese warrior in the same way? Leave your opinion in the comments. The reality is that even official duels were not a guarantee of an honorable death. Losing a duel to a samurai who owned his own martial arts school meant total ruin. His students would abandon him. His reputation would be destroyed. Entire families could lose social status. So many of the defeated who physically survived ended up committing seppuku, ritual suicide, to regain some dignity. And it wasn't a quick death. The samurai would plunge a short blade into his own abdomen, making a deep horizontal cut, and then an assistant called a kaishaku would decapitate the warrior with a single blow. But if the kaishaku failed, if the blow wasn't perfect, the samurai would agonize with his entrails exposed while subsequent attempts were made. Historical accounts describe grotesque scenes where 3 or 4 blows were needed to finally separate the head from the body. Duels also had extremely specific unwritten rules. Mai, a concept combining distance and time, was obsessively studied. A samurai needed to know exactly how far his opponent could reach him, how long it would take to close that distance, and in what fraction of a second an opening would appear. Miyamoto Musashi developed 9 fundamental principles that guaranteed success in duels. He taught that it was necessary to observe every minute movement of the opponent, a subtle change in posture, a slight shift in the eyes, the way they held their weapon. Everything revealed intentions. Musashi also used brutal psychological tactics. He would purposefully arrive late to duels to irritate his opponents. He used wooden swords against sharp katanas to humiliate his adversaries. When challenged by the elite Yoshioka school of Kyoto, Musashi destroyed 3 generations of the family in successive duels. First, he defeated the leader Seijuro with a single blow that crushed his shoulder and arm. Then he faced his brother Denshichiro in a duel to the death and killed him. When the third leader of the family, a boy of only 12 years old named Matashichiro, challenged him, Musashi saw through the trap. The boy arrived with 100 armed men, but Musashi had hidden himself beforehand and observed everything. He leaped from the shadows, cut through the surprised mercenaries, and decapitated the boy before fleeing. Yes, Miyamoto Musashi killed a 12-year-old child in a duel. This was the reality of the samurai. There was no romanticism. There was only survival. And the physical cost, even for the victors, was absurd. Severed fingers, deep scars, injuries that never healed. After killing Kojiro in 1612, Musashi immediately regretted killing such a talented swordsman. From that moment on, he never again accepted duels to the death. He continued fighting, but only in non-lethal combat. He spent the rest of his life teaching, writing, painting, sculpting, seeking some kind of redemption or inner peace. In 1640, he became an advisor to Lord Hosokawa and eventually retired to a cave where he wrote The Book of 5 Rings, a few months before dying in 1645. Not by a sword, but by illness. After surviving more than 60 deadly duels, Japan's greatest swordsman was finally defeated by something that no martial technique could combat. Preparing for a duel also involves specific rituals. Before going into combat, samurai participated in farewell ceremonies. They visited temples, wrote death poems, and organized their affairs as if they would never return. Some practiced negative visualization, vividly imagining the worst possible scenarios. They visualized being cut, bleeding, and dying. This practice reduced fear. Modern psychological research confirms that this technique works. When you have already imagined and accepted the worst possible outcome, your mind stops panicking. The samurai instinctively understood what neuroscience only proved centuries later, that the perception of control preserves cognitive function under extreme stress. When you have trained obsessively, visualized all scenarios, and even accepted death, you maintain mental clarity even when a man is trying to kill you with a sword. If you enjoyed discovering the brutal and deadly truth behind samurai duels, the reality that Hollywood never shows, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more fascinating revelations about history's most lethal warriors.